Well, my name is Maelen Nakasawa, and I am deconstructing Christianity, evangelical Christianity. So I grew up going to one church my whole life, and around the age of 19, after I sort of got out of the Sunday school and youth ministry, you're supposed to go into the adult church, listen to the sermons, and I did. And going into that, I wasn't feeling like I was getting what I was supposed to out of the sermons. I wasn't really connecting with the pastors that were there at the church like I had in the youth ministries. So I decided that I was going to try a different church. Around 19, I switched to a different church in my hometown. I stayed there for a little while. I was okay with it. Things started to pop up a little bit here and there that I had questions on, but I didn't really pay too much attention to it yet. I moved to Los Angeles for a job, and it was very lonely because I didn't know anyone. So I was so used to a church community my entire life that I simply just looked for a church community to kind of fall into. So I found a church in Los Angeles that I liked, that was a little bit more contemporary, that kind of went with the vibe that I was, enjoying. And that church was called Mosaic. It's still in existence. And I was happy with the pastor there at that time. So I had started going to Mosaic for a little while. I thought I would find a community there, but it was a pretty large church. So I had a hard time connecting with people individually. So I wound up going home after about a year of that job there, came back, went back to the other church that I had been going to before. Then after a shorter amount of time being home, I began to date someone who's now my husband, and he lived 2 hours away from me. So I was on the weekends going to where he lived and hanging out with him on the weekends. So I was missing church more and more. As time went on, and as I sort of started to see the world as a whole and things that were going on geopolitically and within the United States, and things happening where Christianity was being used as a weapon to sort of accomplish goals politically that I was not seeing that I liked, and seeing these things happen that I was pretty unfamiliar with because I had been very sheltered growing up, and church was my life. I went to church 2 to 3 times a week. My parents were divorced when I was 9, so my mom very much clung to the church and was dependent on the church for a lot of different reasons. So we were at church all the time and doing different programs and camps and all that sort of stuff. So that's what I was used to my whole life. And then being out on my own, going to school, living in a different city, dating someone, being around their family, and kind of just seeing the world a little bit differently gave me pause and caused me to start saying, okay, maybe I need to ask some questions a little bit, because the whole foundation and premise of Christianity is faith without sight. It's a tough pill to swallow when you start to see things that are not godly by all accounts and purposes, and kind of having to sit back and say, okay, maybe we should take a look at this. Maybe I should be questioning these a little bit. Maybe I should be looking at the origins of this. Maybe I should be, talking to a few people about what their thoughts are on this. And so it sort of just started snowballing from there. I grew up thinking one thing for forever. And when you start to question things, you start to get a bit of pushback. It's definitely caused a lot of rifts in relationships in my personal life. About once a year, I have a pretty large argument with my mom, but we do get along for the most part. It's hard to conversate with her about certain things, but there has definitely been some strain, and not even just her, but other people within my life and in my immediate family, my grandparents and other religious family members, other religious friends that were very close that I grew up with. So it's tough. The power and the strength that religion that's almost cult-like can have on someone is very strong. And the fact that that's all you've known your entire life, and that's the principles you were raised on, and that was your foundation for literally everything, is very hard to detach from. And even still, it's like a gradual thing for me. It's hard. But I would say that there was one instance in particular that made me really, really take 10 steps back, because I was really taken aback by it. It was with a family member, and they're of an older generation. We had a perfectly fine holiday visit. And at the end of the visit, I was about to leave, and I overheard in the other room these family members talking about some political figure of some sort, but they were of African American descent. And they used the N-word towards that person. I just felt so much rage that they would use that word and just use it so flippantly to describe someone in a demeaning, derogatory way. And I was probably 19 at that point too. But I knew the difference between right and wrong in using that word. And so I yelled from the other room and I said, "Shut up," like really, really loudly. I just didn't even know how to respond to it. I was so upset. So I went into the other room and I was like, "How could you do that? That's so wrong. What are you doing?" And they got very upset at me, said, we can say whatever we want in our house. This is our house, all that stuff. So I left, and obviously I was very upset. And a couple days later, I was driving through that area again and decided, okay, I'm going to stop and talk to them now that I've had a couple days to think on it and cool down. So I came to their house and I said, okay, can we talk a little bit about this? And they said, sure. So I sat with them and I apologized. I said, I shouldn't have yelled at you from the other room. Obviously, that was rude of me, and I apologize for that. But I need to know where your stance is on this, because this is not okay. And we sat for probably about an hour and a half and talked. Their answers were just really, really terrible and caused me a lot of grief. And at the end of the session of talking with them, I was point blank, I said, is it just that you feel that you as white people are better and not equal to Black people? And they said yes, and they agreed. So I said, okay, we need to take some time apart. And I didn't wind up speaking to them for at least 2 years, because it was very hard for me to see people that I loved and care about be so hateful in the name of Christianity, because that's what it was. And that's what we continue to talk about. Through that entire conversation, these people that I was discussing this with were constantly bringing up Bible verses and throwing out situations within the Bible that they felt was compelling evidence as to why they were right. And being so hateful in the name of Christianity is what really threw me off. I was like, nope, I can't do that anymore. I need to look into this more, because this is not okay. How could God want that? That's not right. Having that happen and taking time away from these family members, and beginning that sort of snowball where I started looking into things more and questioning things more, that's sort of when it started. Because as someone that's young, when someone is being cruel and rude and hateful, like you're not a child, but you can tell, and the difference between right and wrong, and calling people names. That was sort of my start to the whole snowball effect of the deconstruction journey. When I was questioning things, and as I got older, a specific church local to us that was a different denomination but very similar went through a very public scandal that happened, and it didn't involve me at all. I just knew about it. And so you become very disillusioned with a faith that you realize people are human, things happen, and it's not great. And you also become disillusioned when you find out through research and other means, I guess, that things tend to be covered up when Christianity is involved. It's not a nice thing. I don't know that I could ever go back in the sense that I was before. Not at all. It's too much hurt and too much pain in the past to reconcile. If I see something that is very wrong on a humanitarian level, whether something is like a right being taken away. For instance, one of the big controversial issues within Christianity is the topic of LGBTQ and whether that is okay or not. So seeing how people were being treated and having been a member of that and having a hard time coming to terms with that myself, not being able to voice my concern about it, and then having friends that were saying things that were just contradictory and really hard to swallow, I'm the type of person that will just cut that person out of my life if I don't want that, if I don't want their energy or whatever it is around me, or their negativity, because I don't see that as value to me in my life and what I'm trying to accomplish. And so I personally have lost friends in the sense that if they are acting a certain way, I just remove them. If I've had a conversation with them and I can't come to a consensus that I'm content with, I just will sometimes have to say, okay, I have to cut ties with you then, because this is really heartbreaking for me. And I'm sad that I have to do this, but it's something that I have to do. I haven't had a pastor, like I haven't had my youth pastor, I haven't had one of the pastors from my church reach out to me, because I don't tend to stay social media friends with them, because I already know that those things would be happening all the time if I was, and I don't live in the same city anymore, so we don't run into each other. One of the biggest reasons that I started exploring deconstruction was because of my job. Because in the legal field, I really value knowing the whole story. And that's not what I used to value, because again, it was faith without sight. And now in the legal field, you have to know the whole story and you have to know all the facts, or else you're going in blind. And so I'm not a fan of that. Like, I'm not a fan of going in blind. I want to know all the facts, you know? So it's definitely changed how I view things exponentially. I'm now 29. And so from the age of around maybe 21 to now, I've been actively questioning things and researching, and started my career in the legal field. And research has just become a hobby of mine. I very much enjoy research. And so finding out different things, you know, that have gone on throughout history and that are going on politically or whatever the case may be, I'm always very interested to gain that information. So it has definitely played into how I view Christianity as a whole and how it has played into so many things historically. It really gave me pause as I was growing up through my 20s and saying, we can't look at things like this. This is ridiculous. I recently started researching and listening to biblical scholars on the book of Revelation. I've become very interested in learning about the book of Revelation itself in relation to Christianity and what's going on in Israel and Palestine and how Christians view it. So, of course, I wanted to research that as well. And when you're a kid in Christianity, Revelation is one of the scariest books. So you try not to look at it. You have to look at it a little bit, at least for me. You try to stay away from it because it's a little bit freaky. And it's funny because us as Christians, and even lots of other religions as well, or even people not in religion at all, will make fun of other religions. And you're like, oh, that's so weird. That's different. And then you read our own book of Revelation and it's talking about dragons and it's talking about, you know, seven-headed beasts and stuff. And you're like, oh, we have some weird stuff too. I started listening to some biblical scholars, and one specifically that I really like, where he really takes apart stuff very well. And he was discussing the side of Revelation where it was written in Greco-Roman times, where there's a lot of persecution of Christians. And when you're seeing all of the bad guys, all of the Romans, they're getting what they want, they're not getting their comeuppance, and you're, you know, being persecuted, you're being exiled to an island, you're seeing all these bad things happen, you begin to fantasize about what's going to happen in the afterlife. And so this was written in a time where they're fantasizing about what's going to happen in the afterlife to these people who are not getting their comeuppance in real life. There's so much evidence surrounding the book of Revelation that really is just sort of a fantastical literature that was written because of the issues going on at that current time. I've made a lot of really, really good connections, sound connections through my husband, through his family too. And that was another huge thing for me. I didn't grow up with a huge family. My husband did. So coming to know them and gain friendships with them and go to their family functions and stuff, it really made me feel like a little bit more whole, because all those sort of things I was missing growing up. I didn't have a dad. So meeting my husband's dad and his stepdad and all of his extended family too definitely created more of a whole community for me. So seeing other people's ways of life and how they didn't live in fear like I was constantly doing as a Christian was so refreshing. When you grow up in the church the way I did, it's not like a constant living in fear, but you're taught a certain way and the world is going to end at some point. There's the end times and purity culture and all that stuff. So it really wraps up a whole lot of trauma within that experience. And so seeing different people's ways of life after I moved here and in my career and in my job has been very eye-opening. Social media has become a huge part of community for me. Seeing other people's stories and engaging with other people on their thought processes is very healing and validating, because you know that you have a lot of past trauma from it, but you don't know how many other people are experiencing the same thing as you until you actually see other people talk about it. And the rise of social media in that sense has been very interesting to see. And I think it's a pretty recent thing. I think mainly with TikTok and social media platforms like it, being able to see people even around the world say stuff similar to you. So it's a pretty big thing, and finding and connecting with other people who have gone through the same or very similar journey to me with regard to deconstruction and learning and researching and being willing to be wrong. That's the biggest thing for me, is being willing to be wrong. You have to at least open yourself up to that and not just stay closed off, because that's how you keep yourself in that little bubble.